And this month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored in part by Allison Cook, Super Inframan, and Eric Hervin. Thank you all so much for your support. And if you want to become a patron and help support Where Did the Road Go, you can do so at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's only $3 a month. You get extra content all month. You can also support the show through donations off the website or pick up some merch. All available at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight in studio, I have with me Natalie.
Hi.
And Chris Ernst.
Hello.
And you came up and we went to some of the weird places I've had stuff happen, Chris.
Yeah, you showed me around to the different cemeteries, and I got some stories about different encounters at each of those. It was pretty cool. I mean, these are interesting places. The first cemetery in particular, I'm curious to know more about, like, what that land was at one point.
Yeah, I think I tried to look that up and couldn't find a whole lot.
Right.
I mean, because it dates back to the mid-1800s when the cemetery was founded. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of history out there, but not as much as, I would like.
Yeah.
And I'm also confused because when I looked it up, the Tibetan Buddhist monastery was only 2 blocks from the graveyard, and now it's like across town.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are there 2? Or am I remembering something wrong? Or did something change? Is it a Mandela effect?
It would be that's the extra joke is it's a Mandela
effect. Yes.
Because we're talking about a Buddhist.
But yeah, the thing we did verify, however, is it is considered the seat of the Dalai Lama in North America.
That's right.
So not just the U.S., but all of North America. Mm-hmm. And I've been told it's considered to be they consider it to be the 3rd most powerful energy spot on the planet. Mm-hmm. So being the seat of the Dalai Lama kind of backs that up a little bit. I don't remember if I was able to find more information on it. I was researching it when I was writing my book. Yeah. I'd also really like to get a magnetic anomaly map of the area.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah. Because there are other old graveyards around here. There are tons of them. But none of them have the activity that one does.
Yeah. And
as I said to you, that one, stuff happens when it's dark.
Happens when it's dark.
And
it looked like it had... Did it have a river or water on either side? Or it couldn't...
Creek through the middle of it.
Creek through the middle of it. That's
right.
What it was,
and then we went to the Potter's Field for the Willard Psychiatric Center, where everything happened during the day.
Yep.
And there's water on both sides of that leading right into the lake at the bottom of it.
Yeah.
But both those areas I just like going to. Like, they feel good to me. It's not... It's like, yeah, it's a haunted graveyard, but it feels really nice.
Oh, they do. Both of them had really, calm and sort of peaceful feelings to them. I mean, the last significant graveyard I'd been to, I was telling you, was one in near Sonora, which was an old clamper graveyard. Clampers being like a kind of secret society from the West Coast that my friend and frequent collaborator Bill is fascinated with, and we were out there. And it was an great cemetery, very similar actually to the one that we were at today, but I definitely felt some, there were footsteps behind me, and as I was videotaping, nothing malevolent. I mean, I never experienced things in a malevolent way, but it was, I definitely felt like something was there watching me film it. Not today, but we were also kind of in and out, and we were talking a lot to each other. Yeah.
And a lot of times there's, as I told you, I would go to that Potter's Field all the time when we were hanging out with friends in Willard. And I mean, it seems like, lots of stuff happened here. But I mean, when you take it with how much we were there,
Yeah.
It really wasn't that often that things happen, but it's just that every once in a while something weird happened.
Something weird would happen.
And I could say the same thing about the one in Ithaca, except the one in Ithaca is a little more consistent. You know, if you stay there long enough, you're more than likely to see at least a few odd lights or shadows that just shouldn't be there. Mm. And we were talking about the idea that these places, especially the old graveyards, were built in sacred spots, which might also explain part of why they're energized.
Well, you get the double, yeah. So both, if it's built upon a sacred spot, you know, if these are, you know, graveyards that have been built upon for longer periods of time, particularly, could be built upon a sacred spot, but then it also has, at least in my opinion, the accumulation of all the people that have been, you know, all the people that are buried there, too. Yeah. And all the emotions of the people that go there, too, because you have to, at least for me, I feel like with graveyards and cemeteries, you have to also think of the fact that it's not just the people that are passed, you know, the spirits of the undead that are the dead that are there, but the emotions, the incredibly strong emotions of all the people that are visiting there.
Yeah, yeah. Probably more so than the dead.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, they're dead. They're not necessarily with their bodies.
Yeah.
And it's always one of those things where people are like, "Oh, graveyards are haunted because dead people are there," and I'm thinking, if I was dead and out of body, I'm not sure I'd want to hang out in the grave. I mean, maybe right. I would just to scare people. But, I mean, you would think it's more likely they'd go to what they were familiar with.
Right. Well, that's also coming from the idea that, like, everybody has a ghost and that, like, they stick around and go, woo, after they're dead. They always, then, like, dressed in the exact same clothes that they were in.
Right, of course. So let's see. There was a couple of things I pulled. I saved. Now let's see if I can find them with the cat in my face. Here's the article I wanted to talk about. Brains might sync as people interact, and that could upend consciousness research. And this comes out of Discover magazine from July 26, 2021. And basically, the summation of this is that they were testing with various ways of measuring brain activity. People doing tasks cooperatively versus separately. So what they found is that if people are cooperating in a task, aka something like playing music, their brains would sync in a way that they couldn't find a materialist explanation for. They would sync in it wasn't social cues, it wasn't anything in the environment, but if they were applied to the same task but separately, their brains would not sync. It's only if they were working cooperatively.
Right.
Now, this doesn't surprise me. Yeah. I'm just happy to see science supporting this idea.
And are they measuring this using
MRIs and a few other things? Yeah, so I think there were 3 different brain imaging things they were using.
So people are doing collaborative things while they're in MRIs? Machines?
I'm trying to look it up what it was.
That'd be crazy. I mean, I believe it. I'd be curious as to how they're...
It'd have to be a functional MRI.
Yeah.
They have a lot of new technology. That's the other thing. I don't know enough
about it, I guess.
Okay, so there are different ways of measuring neural oscillatory activity, but the most common method is known as the EEG, where small metal discs are placed on the scalp.
Okay.
Researchers have observed neural activity while they complete cognitive tasks with techniques like EEG, functional magnetic resonance imaging, so fMRI, which is a machine that detects oxygenated blood. I can't speak. Is where oxygenated blood is flowing in the brain. Functional near-infrared spectroscopy, FNRIS, also detects blood flow in the brain. So that's what they're using.
Okay.
So EEG, fMRI, and FNIRS.
Okay.
Are you familiar with these?
Yeah.
You want to explain them to people a little?
You want me to explain those? Well, the EEG to me makes sense because you're actually able to visualize the synchronization of the, you can actually compare the readouts and see how the synchronization might be happening. I'm not sure how that would look on an fMRI.
Okay. Well, it says it detects blood flow, so...
Yeah, that would make sense because you can see, the illumination of the
What is an EEG? That's electroencephalogram?
Yeah,
Is that what it stands for? And does it measure? That's the one that has it essentially comes out with like, I'm showing my idiocy when it comes to this kind of work. It's like a spiky I think of like graph.
Yeah, it's sort of it's not dissimilar to like an EKG, like an electrocardiogram, where you can actually see
and so you're measuring like the electrical impulses.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a fit 48-hour one once. No, 72 hours. Never mind. I was strapped with that thing. You can actually see the various like layers of the brain that they read out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's what they're doing to verify that the brains are actually syncing. And when they're not, like I said, what's interesting is they put them on the same task, but not together. They don't sync. So unconsciously, people's brains are syncing. And as a musician, I'm sure you...
Well, that's the first thing that pops to my mind. Is like, I would love to have this be done to a bunch of people who are playing music together.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's part of the...
I don't think it said anything about it. It did reference people playing music as part of an example of it.
Okay.
And I brought up, when we discussed it yesterday a little bit, I brought up there's an album by the French band Air.
Yeah.
Called Walkie Talkie, sorry, I had that backwards, from 2003. And allegedly they named it that because they felt like they had a telepathic connection while they were creating this two guys.
Yeah.
So.
That's interesting. I didn't know that was the reason for the name of it, but that makes sense.
You're familiar with the album?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It's a really good album, too. That's, And
interestingly, when I started, the reason I found out about them is I had a couple of their albums on my playlist way back in the early aughts, and I just didn't really listen to the albums. They're just sitting on there.
Yeah.
And then when a bunch of weird stuff happened, all of a sudden I had these crazy synchronicities with them coming on shuffle.
Yeah.
So I started reading about the band and how they, if I recall correctly, and somebody might know more than I do, but they built a studio out in the woods in order to sort of commune with the spirits, the nature spirits. And then they were talking about how they had like a fairy cat that would come in and weave its way around their legs while they were recording and stuff like that.
I really didn't know any of this. That's very neat.
Yeah, there's like all this weird mystical stuff around there.
That's really cool. I'll have to look into that. I knew them more because they had worked with Sofia Coppola a lot doing her soundtracks, but I didn't know that about their recording. I'm going to have to look into that. That's really cool.
I think they were also... it's been many, many years since I read about this. They were part of a French program that was going to send music out into space for aliens.
Oh, wow, yeah. Well, the French seem to have a very sophisticated take on the UFOs, if not the supernatural, maybe? I don't know.
Well, I thought it was funny that they were dealing with like these, kind of French fairies in the woods, and then also beaming out to aliens. Like they're almost there. They're almost right.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. I'm gonna look more into that. That's awesome. It makes me appreciate them as a band more too. Like knowing that's how they're working.
Yeah.
So it looks like this guy who did the research is still trying to break it down to some level of materialism. But even his trying to do that is not being accepted very well by mainstream science. So it's kind of like, it's kind of amusing in a sense and kind of sad in another.
What is their argument against it? Is it too restrictive?
Well, they're saying that the mainstream argument, where is it? His idea is built on a school of thought called complex systems theory, which would agree that consciousness emerges from multiple interacting brain networks. He goes a step further by asserting that certain characteristics central to our experience of consciousness, like the deep sense of social connectedness, cannot be explained by reducing the system to one individual brain. Simply, water can't be reduced to its components of hydrogen and oxygen because the two complex systems interact and drive its complex behavior. The mainstream neuroscience field hasn't yet accepted these ideas, though. Many researchers assert that the brain requires physiological, localized connection to transfer information. The language of the brain is communicated via anatomical connections rather than regions speaking to each other through phase synchronization. So they don't really have anything. It's just their opinion, basically. That, it's materialist. The brain can't go outside itself, so you have to come up with a better answer here.
Right.
Baby steps at this point.
Yeah. Right,
They've
exactly.
identified a pattern.
Yeah, and I mean, that's great in a sense, but at the same time, it's kind of like you should be going with, how about consciousness isn't confined to the brain?
Yeah.
But that's a step way too far for a field that should be open to this type of speculation.
Yeah.
As science, they should be going, well, we don't know, so let's openly look at all the possibilities. But they've already determined that no, consciousness doesn't exist outside the brain.
Right.
Your science disproves this in some way, so your science must be wrong. You got to fix that.
It's funny because, a lot of people use Occam's razor as... I think a lot of skeptics use Occam's razor as a reason, they're like, oh, right. Occam's razor. Well, Occam's razor actually, like, if you really look at it, and it was something I looked at a bit when I was in grad school with some people that are much smarter than me, old professors and stuff like that. Some of them actually are very smart. But anyway, Occam's razor it's not that the simplest answer is most likely the best. It's that the answer that includes the least amount of assumptions.
Right.
And that's a very different thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like oftentimes the way in which skeptics use Occam's razor, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot. Like, they're doing exactly what it's not supposed to be doing.
Yes.
You're basing it upon a series of, these assumptions. And of course it goes both ways, but yeah.
Sure. And sometimes assumptions that are way crazier than the initial thing being reported.
Yes.
It's like, so the chances of that happening are 1,000,000 to 1 versus their explanation, which is 10 billion to 1,
Yeah.
I really like how this came up because I've been thinking about it increasingly obsessively over the last couple of weeks. Occam's razor and that concept.
Yeah.
I think I have that right. I think that's kind of what it is.
It seems close to
I'm
my
sort of like simplifying it probably, but I think that's kind of what it is, yeah.
And you got to wonder too with this synchronization thing. Like we were talking today about a couple of different experiences I had where one person saw stuff and the other people didn't.
Right.
And it's like, is that some kind of brain synchronization?
Right.
In one case it was a girlfriend I was very close to, in the other case it was just a friend. So I don't know, what the parameters there are, if that's even what's happening.
Yeah, there's the story that Adam Gorightly talks about a lot, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything, where he talks about how he saw his UFO encounter was when he and a friend of his, when they were younger, took LSD and had this encounter together, but he was talking about it in terms of they had the same encounter. And, whether or not you believe that one has to do with the other, I mean, at least Adam feels that way. But yeah, it's interesting. And then I have had personal experiences where I remember in my youth where a bunch of us were on different types of, hallucinogens, and some people would be having really intense experience. Some people had experiences and then some people didn't. And we were all in the same woods at the same time, and some people would see things. And this is where you get into that whole idea of delusional hallucination versus quote unquote reality and what's real. So a lot of skeptics would say, oh, well, that's because they were on the drugs. Right. But, maybe those drugs do something. I mean, some different substances do different things, A lot of America is on a certain substance that, does stuff to your brain to make you feel a different way. Like, there are effects that happen.
Sure. Yeah. Except most people don't consider things like caffeine a drug.
That's true.
Or alcohol, for that
matter. Or alcohol,
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard, where do you draw the line between what's real and what's not real?
That's the thing. I don't think there is a line. No. But that's me,
Because everyone's reality is a little bit different. None of us are experiencing the exact same reality. Yeah. We have sort of a consensus, some of us more than others, but I mean, it's not the same reality because it's shaped by our experiences, our memories, our interpretations, our emotions. And so and what we're perceiving. Some people hear and see more than other people.
That's what I think is key. I almost try to use the word perception rather than reality. Like, what is our perception? Because I don't feel like I'm going on a limb by saying human beings, even if they have the most sophisticated, measurement tools, we are not experiencing or seeing even a fraction of the entirety of reality. If you want to say reality is everything that exists.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
there is only a small amount that we are perceiving, our consciousness, and we're perceiving it in a very focused way through these very focused sense organs.
And our brain's a filter.
Yeah.
That's really
And,
restrictive.
you know, some of the yogis that I've talked, you know, or people that are in more, you know, embroiled in a cosmology that comes from Hinduism and Vedanta and Sufism, they would make, you know, they believe from their experiences, and I guess from lineages of history, that, you know, within your subtle and mental body, if you do believe that there's a, you know, they talk about it in terms of there being your gross body, which is this body that we inhabit. There's your subtle body, which we're not aware of, which is your energetic body. And then there's your mental body, which is, you know, consists of your thoughts, of like, it's a mental body. But that each of these has their own quote unquote organs that you sense through. And as you know, you spiritually evolve, you start to use these organs.
Right.
And that there are some people that are, you know, in these interstitial areas that are using both our gross organs and the subtle organs to see, like your subtle eye, your subtle nose, your subtle ear, and that sometimes that can be very, you know, disconcerting or disturbing, you know, as you're
It makes sense for out-of-body experiences.
Yeah.
Because you have that proprioceptive self that peels away from, you know, the heavier self, but you still have the kind of sensory experience, but it's vastly different, and I imagine
that's exactly. And these guys, you know, and women, these folks say, like, the way that they describe it is that you use your astral body, like, I'm sorry, what is it? It's that when you're awake, you're using your gross organs to sense. When you're asleep, you're using your subtle organs to sense the gross world. So you're essentially using your, like, energetic organs to sense the gross world around you in your dreams. But then when you're astrally projecting, or when you have the consciousness of it, you're using your subtle organs to see the subtle world, or something like that. I think that's how they were trying to parse it out for me.
That actually reminds me of the experience I had on mushrooms.
Yeah.
Was almost like it was overwhelming because it was a combination of those.
Yeah.
You know, it was actually experiencing the gross and the subtle.
Right, yes,
simultaneously.
at the same time.
It was too much to compute. It was just.
Well, that
makes sense.
Yeah, from some of the folks that I talked to, that was like, that would jibe in the sense that the what I got in terms of an explanation for what psychedelics do is that they show you shadows of the subtle. They basically allow you to use your gross organs to see the subtle plane, but when you do that, it's almost like trying to see something that has too many dimensions or angles, like geometry. So it can scare people, is what it is.
It's non-Euclidean.
Non-Euclidean or something I don't.
Fractaloid, all of that.
Yeah, that I can't even. Yeah.
So you're seeing
That's
Cthulhu,
interesting.
is what you're saying. You're seeing Cthulhu, is what you're saying.
You're seeing Cthulhu. Yeah. No, you're seeing. Well, it wouldn't be Cthulhu. It would be you'd be seeing Azazel, the blind idiot god at the center of all creation.
Fair enough. I don't know why I didn't think of that.
I'm a big fan of Azazel.
Yeah. I can't say I'm not. What was I going to say? So I guess brain synchronization is just another one of those factors that you can put into the whole picture of how we perceive this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's also possible that one person perceives it and someone else picks up on the first person perceiving it. Mm-hmm. If your brain syncs up with someone else's for whatever reason. It's just we don't know, because no one's been on one of these machines when they're having a paranormal experience. So
right, and I'm still suspicious of whether or not that you'd be able to read anything completely off of, whether or not you'd get that, you know.
And I think if two people were having a weird experience that couldn't be recorded, and science said, oh yeah, their brains were synced, they were having a mutual hallucination. Yeah. You know, they would just throw it out, not as, oh, this was a real experience.
Yep.
So this is kind of a fortuitous discovery, but somebody that heard my interview with Heather reached out and said that she experienced a similar entity to the blonde psychopomp coming to her.
Oh, wow.
So there's another person who did that. And then recently, so we've been talking for a couple months. Recently, she shows me a photo of somebody. I'm not going to say who at this point, but it threw me into this tizzy because it looks so much like the entity.
Yeah.
So of course, I started researching, and all of these weird things started falling into place. Leads me to today when I found a Reddit. I was like, oh, I should, maybe go look this person up on Reddit and see what people are talking about. And it's there's not a lot on there, but like, I don't know, 10 entries down, there's somebody like talking about they had this dream about this person, and then they saw when they woke up somebody else had almost the identical dream that same morning. And then so they went on Reddit to ask, and somebody's like, I also had that, but it was like separated by a day. I don't remember the details, but it was like 3 different people had a similar dream about this person.
This is the same person too that Heather that you were they're talking about on a show like maybe a couple months ago or something, that like this brought you together, right? That
was the one that called himself Gwyn, but this person kind of. Okay, he looks a lot like him if you mashed him with Beck.
Yeah.
So, but there's a whole Reddit. He's a pretty famous person, and I'm like, how did I not notice this person? But he's obscure enough now, after all these years he's been deceased.
Right. Yeah.
So it just, I've seen him in 2 whole movies, and he was a kid, so I don't realize. Yeah.
And he's deceased now.
Yeah, and he hasn't been on my radar at all. So when this person who's also came forward and said that she had this strong vision of Gwyn, we'll just call him. She doesn't know if that's who it was, but the similarities were pretty crazy, and she also has a lot of things in common with Heather and I. So I don't know if it's just are we syncing up? I mean, what's going on? At the same time, how did he speak Welsh? That kind of thing. But at least it brought me to that today. We're talking about that now, where these 3 people
are you syncing up?
Or same dream about another person.
Or if this is a being that has autonomy, like, are you being brought together too as another? Yeah.
But having this other deceased person who died on a date that makes it very eerie.
Yeah.
What is happening now?
Yeah.
It's just kind of thrown me back into almost kind of like a.
So, and again, this is only from the weirdly specific lineage of Dattatreyan and this sort of Sufi Hindu Vedantic Zoroastrian group that I ended up spending some time with and learning a lot from because of my parents. There's a lot of them talk about things going on in these different bodies, and that have and since we don't have the senses, we are not currently conscious of our maybe you are more than I mean, I have no idea since I'm not inside your consciousnesses, but at least me, I'm pretty much all conscious of my gross body,
right?
But that if you're not conscious of that, there still are things that are working. So a lot of times, I guess the explanation for occulted events, or the role of the occult in spirituality, as they would term it, that these are going to be things that you don't know why they're going on, but they're part of it's called inner work, like the inner work that's happening. So essentially, you have this work that you as an individual are also doing unconsciously, I guess, with your subtle and mental body. I don't know. It's something that's still hard for me to kind of wrap my head around.
No, that makes sense.
But it's it's almost like, think of subroutines running in the background,
Well, and Jane Roberts Seth would always say that illnesses, or as he would like to phrase it, dis-ease, came from deeper things not being right that you needed to work on.
Well, that was the whole, wasn't that the whole Elizabeth Cady Stanton, was it Christian Science?
Maybe.
Yeah.
When did Christian Science come around? In the late 1900s?
I mean, it was part of the whole, New Thought. She was involved, not really New Thought in, the 20th century, those, not like the,
that was
I'm forgetting the names of those New Thought people.
That
but
was
she was proto New Thought. Yeah. I think that's definitely connected. But something like, absolutely.
And I mean, some of that is definitely true. Things like Kundalini blocks can cause illnesses. I've seen this happen. I've helped people fix it. And it's kind of hard to deny at that point. But it doesn't mean all illness is that way. I mean, some of it's just limitations we probably need to get over.
And a lot of I have read of many accounts, not just of it happening with Western esotericism, but in particular, a lot of the Indian and Muslim saints that I'd sort of been studying, or some of the more recent yogis, a lot of them would have what they would call spiritual sickness as part of their transformation.
Right.
So at some point in their life, there would be either an event or spontaneously they would have some sort of break. And a lot of times involved in that would be these really long sicknesses that you go in and out of, and that oftentimes there would be once they emerge, there's some sort of greater understanding. It makes me think a lot about, and I don't know if you've ever heard, if people, I don't know if she's ever said this or talked about it. I think she's talked about it on a few podcasts, but Stephanie Quick, who you had on recently with Dave Metcalf, she was talking about how, she was very sick as a young woman, and it was in her sickness and her near-death experiences that she came into contact with the entities that have been teaching her, which is not an uncommon thing. This happens a lot. I've talked to several people when I was traveling through India that would discuss very similar things to this.
I think it's because sickness and trauma are kind of, two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And you get both effects. And I've been, I have chronic illness, so it's something that comes from that. I've noticed a strong correlation between autoimmune disorders and supernatural experiences. Very strong.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but...
Yeah. Yeah.
That is sort of the ultimate question. Why are these things the factors?
Right.
At this point, we're still outlining what those factors are.
Yeah.
Without even being able to describe what they're factors for.
Yeah.
I mean, because, you have all, like we were talking earlier, lights. Lights are a big common factor across paranormal experience.
Yeah.
And, from near-death experience to UFOs to haunted, lights seem to be a primary form of this, but primary form of what?
Right. And why? Primary form of what and for what? Yeah.
And I have that kind of web I've laid out where you have there's environmental factors, there's people are a factor, it's the location you're in, there's solar activity, there's possible cosmic activity, there's stress, there's all these different things that lead to similar experiences. Why? Why does this mismatch group of things sometimes cause a similar experience?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you're talking about Gwen, and that's basically it's one of those things. I heard someone else talking about it. Might have been in the Ghost of Atlantis book, talking about god forms, entities that appear as traditional gods, and what to make of that. Are these things what they say they are, or are they just taking on that image for us? Or did that image come from these things?
Well, so one compelling thing I've still been kind of sitting on and talked to this other person about recently is, well, before I ever heard about Gwen or knew anything about it, there was one particular dream where he showed up. This was after I moved into the apartment building that Heather lives in. And it was just this one-off dream where he's supposed to be, there was nobody living next to us. One of the apartments was empty, and he was supposed to be living in there. And in the dream, I didn't even recognize him. There was, it was not a lucid dream. Right. I didn't recognize him until I woke up, and it was absolutely him. And he had these weird symbols and runes and a kind of a circle on his chest, like a wheel, and I couldn't look at it because it was terrifying. But one of the things he said, just without prompt, is that he was an astronomer. And he was tasked with naming the stars, and this was before I found out anything about Gwyn being one of the 3 major Welsh astronomers.
Right.
So he was actually telling me these things that later became relevant. That was just the one that I've been thinking of lately.
Yeah, and I've had that happen as well with one of the entities I dealt with, where I knew nothing about this entity. I wasn't given the name, but I was given all this information enough so that I could track down the entity and go, oh, this was a real thing. Mm-hmm. What am I dealing with here?
Yeah.
Is it a real person or an entity?
An entity.
An entity, yeah.
So the question becomes, chicken or the egg, really? Like, were these entities that ancient people dealt with and named and identified? Or are there something now that are going, oh, I can put this mask on?
Well.
And does it matter? That's the other thing.
My feeling about it is that they are something that sort of exists between us all, but has its own real agency that will outlive us or outlast us in a sense. And it just identifies itself by the names we've given it. Because how else is it going to, become familiar or communicate with us?
Mm. And there's plenty of overlap between cultures of different entities. And some of it where it's directly borrowed, but others where you look at two completely separate cultures and they have similar entities.
Mm-hmm. And is it just archetypal then? Or,
right.
Because what's interesting to me about this Gwyn is he's not just one archetype. Like, I used to subscribe to that or ascribe to that or whatever completely, where it's just archetypes that are, they're kind of autonomous on their own in your own unconscious mind. So that makes sense. But like, he would represent multiple archetypes like a person would, in a sense. You know what I mean? It's not, I can't just whittle it down to or simplify it.
Yeah.
And I mean, when it happened to me years ago, it was kind of one of those, when I realized what I was dealing with, and I was like, huh. And I'm like, I didn't know about this. I didn't know any of this data, so it almost represents something separate from me.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And the same with yours, where you're being given very specific data that is not part of your unconscious mind.
Yeah.
And yours is very obscure.
Yeah, I'd never heard of him. And then he gave me a different name, but, it was similar enough that it's obviously representative.
Has this been, are you still trying, it obviously sounds like you're still trying, as we all are, trying to figure it out, but is there anything that's come from it that's been like, have you gotten anything personally, like from the information that was given to you? Has it spurned you from Gwyn?
I think trying to understand why an entity like that would select me or Heather or this other person is the bigger question for me, because therein lies, I think, the answer in a sense. And all three of us so far have one thing in common, which is, well, at least in my case, is sort of that kind of psychopomp role that we've been forced into, more or less. Although I think, I can't speak for her, but Heather was going, to graveyards on her own. And that's not something I did, but I've been forced into it through a lot of deaths and, holding my mom and helping her to pass when she was very young, and I was very young. I was only 18. Yeah. So these kinds of things just came naturally to me, and that's the only thing between us, is that we have that sort of, we're magnetized to the death guide role.
Right.
Even though we hate it, or at least we seem to.
But you have there's this being drawn to in it.
But why a Welsh god, I don't know.
Yeah. Do you have any, do you believe in reincarnation? Do you have any thoughts on that? Only
in that I definitely had past life experiences when I was a child. Around the age of 3, they were extremely powerful, and oddly enough, that's what kind of stops me. I remember seeing, as I was growing up, like parts of the UK. Yeah. Like on the coast, like the rocky cliffs, and I would immediately feel like that was the place I was remembering. Yeah. I didn't know exactly where it was. Most of that's gone, and my parents are gone, so they wouldn't be able to tell me now what I was telling them. But, I'd have these memories of when I was 25. Yeah. And all these things that they talk about, which was just so normal to me at the time. Like, well, yeah. But now when I look back on it, it's just a memory of a memory of a memory, and I can barely recall. So I don't know.
I can make, me personally, I guess I can make the statement that I believe in reincarnation from, my own studies and talking to people and my own experiences. And I guess the situation you're talking about now very much reminds me of, different analogies that I've heard from different people about how essentially how souls, intertwine with one another during their reincarnations, and that's just it's part of this process that we're seeing. Like the reincarnation process is part of this bigger like universal life ecosystem, and that we're just not, because I guess of the fact that we don't usually see our past lives, we're not, which is probably for a good reason. I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine feeling as if I was several different people at once. I know some people that do have our systems and
I was gonna
feel
bring
that way,
up. It's weird.
and so maybe they're feeling more than that. But yeah, I guess like my guess as to what's happening would be that you and Heather have been together through different lives in different ways, and that maybe Gwen either is either an actual figure or something that is a non-human creature that was part of something that is part of that.
Who's apparently stealing his appearance from other famous people.
I guess so. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, I guess. But it's interesting you bring up the system, because I was going to bring that up. The first podcast I ever did was my friend's.
Yeah.
It was his, I guess, inaugural episode, and I was the first one on there.
Yeah.
And we did this 2.5 hour thing. It's self-portraits of other people, so it's about multiplicity.
Yeah.
Like this kind of innate multiplicity. And since I do have that, that's where we went. And when you asked about, like, reincarnation, my mind immediately goes to, I think I had multiple memories as a child.
Yeah.
Like, which one is correct?
Yeah.
There's like 3 distinct ones. The strongest one was the one that reminded me of like the cliffs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there were definitely like these feelings, and then I became aware through sickness, like we were talking about, like autoimmune stuff and different things that I've been through, and trauma of these people within me. And the more stressed and traumatized it became, they would all kind of come to the forefront and try to switch and work with the situation. They've never been aggressive. They weren't, because my trauma is not about abuse. It was about death and just like a lot of loss and that kind of thing. But it's nevertheless, it's legitimate trauma.
It's trauma, yeah.
So they were coming forward to help, but they all have these distinct memories and personalities, and so for me it was difficult to extract like Gwyn from that. Right. But he still did feel very different. Yeah. More autonomous, and like he had his own agenda compared to them, where the agenda is the body, like the self. Even if the self is a collective. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, I think that does make a lot of sense. I mean, I believe that we are systems. We're just not, since I believe in reincarnation, I do believe that there are multiple lifetimes. In fact, I probably adhere more towards the Hindu idea of it's like 84 million human lives you go through, the Vedic idea. It's like a lot. I believe there's a lot, and I don't know why. Probably from things people have told me, but I think that they're all there. It's you don't lose it. It's just that in order to get through the process, we're like veiled from certain things, but that's not a constant. And I think some people probably have better understandings of these systems, that really make us up. In some of the stuff that's been told to me in terms of this weird esoteric stuff from some of these yogis is that these all apparently are saved within the mental and subtle matrix, which are that's the eternal soul. Those things don't die; they keep on going. It's just this husk. Like this is essentially this is a vehicle, a vehicle that we are using. But essentially, the idea is to once we're in this vehicle, is to move inward. So you start to be conscious of the subtle body. And then you start to be conscious of the mental body, and finally you're conscious of everything, and I don't know what happens then, because I can't get a clear explanation.
I don't think you can quite get there while still being in this existence.
No.
What about being other animals?
So, I have no particular... there's nothing I personally believe about that. What I've been told from this particular group of people is that... the evolutionary cycle mirrors the spiritual evolution, cycle, and it's not hierarchical in that one is better than the other. It's simply that it's a process, and within that, the one that I was told, at least, I don't think this is necessarily true, is that human consciousness, once it descends from the totality of everything, it starts as like a stone, and you essentially go through stone forms. So if you see a stone out there, that's the same sort of soul as you and I. It's just at the very, very beginning of its cycle. But that's also equally as much a person as we are, if that makes any sense. And then you go from stone to vegetable, and then from vegetable, and this is the weird thing, is that, and they're very specific about this too. The lineage of Meher Baba talks about you go from vegetable form to worm form, which is like insects and lizards and snakes and worms, and then from there to fish, and from fish to birds, and then birds to mammals. And then at the end of mammals is human. And that we have the right amount of consciousness to try to start working inwardly again, except we have all of the baggage of our evolutionary cycle we also have to get rid of. Which is like, I think that's the simplified version as far as I understand it. I don't know.
It makes sense, and I mean it's sort of a clean conception of it.
It is. That's what kind of makes me suspicious of it, is how clean it is. I'm kind of like, anything that's that clean, I'm like, no, it can't
That's
be.
what I'm wondering, because I've known systems, multiple systems, actual DID, dissociative identity disorder. Yeah. I don't have that, but these people would, and some of the people in them were not people.
Yeah.
They're other animals.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre, but to me, or from my experience, the only thing I can speak of is there was this 1 year, 2006, where I had just crazy experiences and dreams where I was being other things, like from their perspective. And obviously I have no proof of that's what it's like, but there was one, I want to say it was like a 15-second episode right before I woke up, because I woke up, it was so jarring, of being a snow goose.
Yeah.
With a nest and running from something and stumbling over other snow geese.
Sure.
And it was so compellingly real that I had like this immediate crisis when I woke up, because I had just been, I wasn't thinking like a human. There was nothing like that. So I had experiences like that. I'm not saying I was a goose in a past life or something.
Sure.
This could have been happening somewhere real in the Arctic at that time. Like it could have been consecutive or something like that.
It could have been consecutive, or but I bet if I told that story to like this one guy I talked a lot to, Bal Natu, he would say, "Oh, it's because you were a goose. You were remembering when you were a goose, because you were a goose, and it's still in there as part of you.
Right.
It's just
right.
You're not remembering it, because if you remembered every goose you were and every duck and everything at the same time that you're remembering that you're you, that would be quite difficult, And that's
the question is, what is you and who is different? Around that time, I also had a dream, another 15-second dream, where I was seeing like a college classroom. I saw the teacher walk into a door and all this stuff. I woke up and I was freaking out because it wasn't me. I asked my then partner, because I knew he'd been in class, and he sent me a photo of what I had seen from his eyes at that moment.
From his eyes, yeah.
At that moment, while I was asleep, he was in this class.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, that's
saying psychically.
That's psi. Yeah.
But the reason I bring that up is like, where do we draw the line?
Yeah.
Because all of that felt the same to me, and it's more like our brains are an attenuating organ that stops us from, gives us a sense of self.
Yes.
That's I think the scary. I mean, I don't know if it's the sense that I get from, again, all these guys like Ball, who I've spoken with over the years, is that, it is like, this is in fact like the Chris Ernst that I am. It's not like, that is not really my identity. This is the most current version.
Right.
And that it would be like, if the spark were to shift over to like one of you, I could feel as you, because I'd be inside you.
Right.
I would be like inhabiting It is. I don't know. I mean, again, it gets into this twisty area where I really think it's like us trying to imagine 18 dimensions type.
Right.
Where words somehow fail us. But yeah, that's an interesting experience. Yeah,
there is, I think, more than one sense of self is the thing.
Yeah.
So there's the basic ego self.
Yeah.
And that part of us, I don't think, that part of us might end up being a ghost.
Yeah.
Okay. Slept off like, a shell that you no longer need anymore.
The shade idea. Yeah.
Right. But there's that true self part of you that's much bigger and doesn't have all the petty stuff that the ego carries around.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what your true identity is. Now, the way Seth described it, first of all, Seth talked about time as happening all at once.
Yep.
So those past and future lives were happening all at once.
That's same thing from my guys, yeah.
From the way he described it, and maybe I didn't understand it right. It's been a good 2 decades since I've read this stuff. But if the interpretation I took on it is that you incarnate as different things, and when those things come back, they don't just join up. Sometimes they become the kind of oversoul and then create other things that incarnate. And I remember him at some point, they were asking about the animal thing, and he's talking about incarnating as different things.
Yeah.
Like he said, sometimes it's relaxing to incarnate as a tree or a rock.
Interesting.
Because that existence is fairly stress-free.
Oh, this is something that somebody who's ascended is able to do?
Well, just anyone. Everyone does this.
Anyone can do this if they achieve a certain level.
No, when you're outside this world, you get to you can choose what to incarnate.
Oh, when you're outside this world, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So from his perspective was also, which I found very interesting, and George Hansen also found this interesting, that Seth described. When he was asked who he was, he's like, "Well, I'm a mix of me and Jane." He's like, "I am not Jane, but Jane is one of my incarnations."
Yeah.
And what I'm talking, as I'm talking to you, it's going through the filter of Jane.
Yeah.
He's like, so some of this is not coming out correctly.
Yeah.
Some of this is being misinterpreted. Her brain is rewriting some of it based on her biases and her beliefs. And it's like, this felt like the most true statement that I've heard anyone channeled say.
I've been told that directly by entities. A number of times.
That it acts like a filter?
Almost that exact phrasing.
Yeah.
Down to the phrasing.
I mean, that's one of the things that stopped me.
Makes a lot of sense to me.
That's what stopped me with the Seth material, where I was like, that makes sense. He's not claiming any omnipotence or anything like that. And he's saying, and even some of the stuff I'm telling you, I might be wrong, and some of it's being filtered wrong, and I don't have the way to translate it to you through Jane in the proper channel.
So when I started, the dream started in 2004, and that kicked me into gear on the weird stuff. So sat down with my friend, and we did the Ouija stuff, and they were the entities on there were saying things like that, like, it's not us, you're translating poorly.
Right.
And then that's when he was like, let me get another one who's better at doing this, because he can pick up on your brain waves better, something like that. Like, really weird stuff. I'm like, okay, we tried it out, and this particular entity was very good at it. And he was still saying, you're still translating poorly, but, and it was weird to see. I don't know if it's just, we were trying to calibrate our own brains or something, or if this was actually an external entity that was also calibrating with us. It was very difficult to tell the difference.
There was something Seth said, I can't quite remember the phrasing, but he said something like, I had a dog, in that he had incarnated as a dog. And then he went, but I've lost track of it. And I found that so interesting. Like, your incarnation has wandered off on its own.
Yeah.
And become its own sort of oversoul, which then creates other souls.
Well, that makes me think of tulpomancy. How if you create a tulpa, it can create other tulpas.
Right.
Yeah. Without your consent or knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, it may all be nonsense, but the reincarnational idea doesn't seem like nonsense to me, simply because of kids remembering this stuff. That's the killer for me right there, is that I can't think, when you're dealing with Occam's razor, the simplest explanation that these kids are remembering past lives. There's no other good explanation. The only things I can even struggle to wrap around that, I mean, it could just be that we don't understand how things work.
Yeah.
But either A, there is a spirit that is giving them this information. Mm-hmm. They're not relaying it like that. They're relaying it like memories, but possibly. Or somehow they are psychically attuned to somebody who lived before and are confusing that with their own memories.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are the only two possibilities, and those two seem like you have to go around the corner to get to them.
Yeah.
Versus it is exactly what the kids say that it is. This is who I was last time. You know?
Well, that's why I think it's compelling when you have multiple past life experiences going on all at once.
Yeah.
That it to me, and again, this was sort of explained on, I don't remember where in my documents it would be, but I should have gone over it because it's a little complicated. The way it got explained was, it is essentially like all of this stuff is floating on the space-time breeze, and a particularly sensitive mind is going to get it, whether it's a child or whatever, because it's also helpful to a growing person's experience if they need to be safe, if they need to remember these things to direct their lives and that kind of thing, which seems to happen quite a bit to these kids.
Yeah, and I think, like, at least from some of the material and the talks that I've had, some of the folks, some of these folks that I've been talking to, it's the things that are going to, like, how do I describe it? The role of the occult, like, this is, they would say, like, if I was talking to, Baal about this right now, or Bao or something, they would say, okay, well, this is because you are essentially, like, not that you're, well, yeah, that you're further on the spiritual path. These are things that, like, essentially what happens is, like, as you start to, go towards the involution stage of human consciousness, that these are not side effects, but they're like, they're things that happen alongside it to many people, and that, in fact, it's, while it can be really disturbing, what it means, in fact, is that you are, I mean, this is the thing where I feel funny saying it because of this whole weird, like, weaponized bastardization of it in terms of, like, the new age idea of, like, 5D vibration or whatever, which, I mean, and I don't want to make, like, if you believe in that, awesome. But I think that that's a kind of weird version of this. But there is the idea that, like, we don't stop evolving, or that there is a spiritual evolution. That's very much at least what, the guys I would talk about, at least when I'm trying, when I in the past, the couple times that I went over to India and I talked to some of these guys and on all the reading of it, like, it really, in trying to get answers about occult stuff, a lot of times what they would go back to is the idea that, like, it's all part of the spiritual path. It's just like a byproduct.
Right, yeah.
And that for some people, it's not a byproduct, but a catalyst.
The siddhas?
Huh?
What are they called?
Cities.
That's
just as cities are, in fact, and that would be, and that, I guess, like, they would talk a lot about how it's not always that case, though, and that particularly if you have somebody looking after you, like, they would prefer to masters a lot, but masters wouldn't necessarily be like a guru that's physical that you're going to. They would talk about masters being like, somebody who comes to you in dreams or something like that, and that they're actually, I mean, these guys very much believe that there are numerous ascended human beings. This is essentially what for anybody that's going to come to Strange Realities in October, I will be talking about this. Alternative narratives of the secret chief theory, that there really are ascended masters that are helping.
Right.
So how do you think those differ? Oh, sorry. Yeah. I want to interrupt. How do you think those differ from, like, the gods, old gods, and that kind of thing?
Well, I don't know what I think, but according to the guys that I've been talking to and the stuff that's written about it, it's that it's all part of the spiritual hierarchy. and that it's all part of the control, kind of a Valet-style control system that is spiritual, and that there are millions and millions of like discarnate entities, and then there are humans that have ascended and that are still helping us, and that a lot of this is kept occulted because it wouldn't work if it was out front. However, it is said that there are five, and it's funny, there are like 5 secret chiefs in this cosmology that apparently are public, and that you can find them, and that at least in this particular lineage that my parents were part of, that I learned from, the last 5 were around at the beginning of the century, and we know who they are. Like I have their names, and stuff like that. And they were called the 5 Perfect Masters, and it's essentially secret chiefs. Mahatma's ascended master thing. So yeah, do I believe that? I have no clue.
I suppose it could exist just like any of the gods could exist. That's the thing is.
Well, so the gods that, I'm sorry, to get back to your question, the gods are real. They're just like Indra is Zeus, is Jupiter.
Yeah.
And that they actually are like, discarnate beings that have power over certain things. They might not exist in the same way that the gods did, in the way they were depicted by, I don't know, the Greeks or something, but there are entities that exist. Yeah.
Well, that's something I find fascinating about my experiences. They do seem to be, not to take the Neil Gaiman route, but evolving. Like they're really trying.
100%.
Yeah, they're trying to keep up with the current.
Well, I think we can all agree it's a weird time. All of these folks from the lineage of Meher Baba, who's the most recent of these perfect masters, they say that this is the Kali Yuga, and we're going through a super transformational time. We're at the end of a cycle of cycles now,
right?
And that's why everything is crazy pants.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that things would be changing, gods would be changing, everything.
Yeah, because I was thinking everything is constantly in transformation, but this is this is a really large.
So if we take the Yuga cycle into account here, as we head toward, is it the Treta Yuga, the highest one?
Right, but so here's the thing, though. That's not the way the Yuga cycle. There are different ways of interpreting how the Yuga cycle works. There's actually a really interesting article, I think it's on Graham Hancock's website, from a new, a doctor from India who talks, he's been doing his research on the Yuga cycles in the same way that, Graham Hancock does. So, sort of within the system, but, a little bit outside.
Right. Yeah.
And he's essentially says that he doesn't think the Yuga cycles are these, in Vedic cosmology, Yuga cycles are attributed to be written out in God years. So if you have 3,000 years, that actually is supposed to mean 300 million years or something like that.
Yeah.
But he's saying that's not true. He believes that it's actually in smaller incremental amounts, and he has mapped it out to kind of work with the 26,000 year cycle, the 12,000 year great year, all of that stuff. But anyway, my point being is that with that, some people believe that yes, you go right back to the top of the yugas, but then some people believe, or they interpret the Yuga cycle, meaning that if we're at the Kali Yuga, which is the sort of bottom point, we actually have to go back up again through the Dwarpa Yuga and up to the Treta Yuga. I think Treta Yuga.
That's what I was just trying to remember what the Golden Age is.
Yeah, the Golden Age. So we will have to, if we're at the Kali Yuga now, we're supposedly coming out, but we will be going into, we have to transition into that next one, but it's not the best one, and then that'll keep on getting. It's not even a better or worse. It's
it's more. There's more awareness. This is what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Walter Crutton's book Lost Star of Myth and Time.
Yeah.
He brings in that smaller cycle of the yugas that's been proposed.
Yeah.
matches it up to the Great Year and also to procession. And this is one of the things, and you know, I'm partially biased because I had that dream where I was offered the 6 books with answers to everything.
That's right.
And I opened the first book, and in the first book, I was shown another sun that was connected to us, and that it was connected electrically. And then I shut the book and went, I don't want to know all the answers. I want to find them. But that led me to the Lost Star.
Aren't you finding them in the book?
Read some more of the book, Seriah.
So, you know, that led me to Walter Crichton. It led me to the electric universe theory as well. Whether or not those are accurate, or if that was just them maybe manipulating my path, I don't know. But, you know, Walter's book suggests that as our other sun, whether it be Sirius, which is the most likely candidate, or something we're not aware of, moves closer, just like solar activity. And this was saying he didn't know, I don't think, that shock connected high solar activity to higher success rates of psychic. So if we have another sun moving in closer, could that be where we start being able to have a wider spectrum of experience, where we start remembering past lives clearly? You know, maybe that golden age is because our senses are fully expanded.
It could be, and it might not even be something physical like with the sun, but imagine if like everybody on Earth really did believe in and like believed in working with the supernatural, like that it was a real part of their everyday life. You know, they thought about dealing with other entities and dreams and experiences just as much as we do, and it was embroiled in every part of our lives in the same way that, like, I don't know, gyms and exercise are, or something like that.
Without the restriction of religion.
Without the restriction of religion. Like, if that actually was happening, that might change, like, even if you just look at the way that, I don't know, Dean Radin or like deals with psi from a material standpoint, or Rupert Sheldrake, you know, does morphic resonance, like that could be all it takes, you know? I mean, it probably will take a while.
Right.
I think you're right. I think that like maybe that's what's happening, is that if we get back and maybe there is something that's physical involved, maybe there is, you know, if we're closer to a second sun, that's part of it too.
And maybe, you know, our sun gets more activated as we get closer to us. Even if it's a brown dwarf or something, it's going to have an effect.
Maybe we create it.
Maybe we do.
Yeah.
Second sun in the lab.
The thing is, especially when you look at the Sirius Foundation's information, I mean, it fits the cycle of precession perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, the speed that we're moving at, all that stuff matches up exactly with what they predicted.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's hard to just toss out, you know? And we know there's something large out there. You know, scientists are constantly looking for Planet X, which would now be the 9th planet instead of the 10th planet. But I mean, and because they know there has to be something out there that's affecting the far out orbits of these satellites and stuff.
But even just from the personal awareness angle, that's something I've been thinking about a lot recently. So I'm glad you brought that up. Just if we all have and exercise the freedom of personal spirituality without the fear of, you know, societal retribution or that kind of thing, you know, ostracization, I think that's extremely important, because that's a lot more experiments going on all at once instead of everybody conforming to a sort of cult mentality. It gives us so much more information, so much more freedom to move around.
Yeah.
I also think it would be very helpful if people understood that dreams are not just junk.
Yes.
That would be a big leap.
Yeah, because, I mean, so many people have just been trained to think that dreams are just subconscious nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just throw it's the garbage you get to witness before it's thrown out.
Right, and yes, sometimes, and I used to refer to them, I still could, I guess, as subconscious dumps.
Sure.
You know, it's your brain going through, you're working.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, you're going to your 9-to-5 job and going through that in a dream, and it's like, that's a subconscious dump. But then there's other stuff that's not that. And that it's a communication either from your higher self, from something else out there, or whatever. And sometimes it's problem solving. You know, I had a computer years ago, and I could not figure out what the hell was wrong with this computer. It would crash if it was in Windows. It would not crash in DOS. But it wasn't... I had reinstalled Windows. I changed every part of this computer except the power supply.
Yeah.
Because I didn't suspect the power supply. And because it wasn't like it was losing power.
Yeah.
You know, there was nothing obvious to suggest that. In the middle of the night, I suddenly woke up from a dream and went, power supply.
Yeah.
It's the power supply. The next day I went out and I swapped the power supply and it worked fine.
There you go.
They had got a refurbished power supply from wherever else they took it. And it was like half the power it actually needed to be to run that computer.
Yeah.
So they got completely ripped off. And that's what was causing the computer to crash. So all this work I did, tracing the logical paths, and my brain in my sleep went, dummy, it's the power supply.
Yeah.
So I don't think I've ever experienced a dump. I've only experienced review.
Yeah.
To me, dreams have always just been purely review, and that's the important thing. I had an experience with a hard drive that started failing. It was an external. And it was like 48 hours of jostling this thing and trying to transfer things before it was too late. That kind of experience. And then I go to sleep, wake up with this immediate epiphany from the dream I just been having, which was reviewing everything that had just happened.
Oh, yeah,
over
I've
the
had
past
that.
40
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and the immediate epiphany was, put it in the freezer. And that's exactly what worked.
Nice.
Every single time.
Well, that's depending on what's wrong with it. The freezing will sometimes unstick a read head.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
yeah?
I didn't know
Okay.
that logically at
Yeah.
all. This was completely intuitive. And then I looked it up afterward, like the mechanism, but...
Yeah, because if it gets
I had
stuck,
no
if it
knowledge.
doesn't get stuck, like it's really, really stuck, if it's just sort of stuck on the platter, because it's never supposed to touch
No,
the
okay.
platter. The change in temperature changes, you know, I forget where it expands.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And it sometimes will pop the reader, the arm free.
Yeah,
That
it
makes
was
a
a mechanical
whole lot of
issue.
sense.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really, yeah. Yeah, I have dream. I was just telling Seriah earlier that I, on the drive up here, I passed by a structure that looked very much like something that, like, I have a lot of dreams really consistently that are about very specific places and environments. And if anybody that knows me, that makes sense. I'm very, psychogeography is something I'm very, very heavily into. And so, but there are these places that I've never been to. They're like, maybe I'll be there at some point.
Right,
Who knows?
right.
But and it's always accompanied by very distinct and very visceral emotions.
Yeah.
Each of these places, regardless of what I'm doing there. But what will happen is that these places, I'll be in circumstances in my waking life where I will see something, or I'll be in a situation that will remind me of this environment, this place. And it will bring up the emotion at that time. And I always am I'm interested in, I guess where the cause is coming from. Like, is it a time loops type thing, or
Right,
is
right.
it something that is, pointing me in a direction? I guess for me, what I've been able to take out of it so far is that whenever this happens, it makes me feel more connected to the dream world.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which in and of itself is great. Like, it's,
Yeah.
part of it, I think I have started doing more of this, I'm completely co-opting it, so you can get down on me for cultural appropriation, but there was something I was reading that there was a particular tribe in Australia, of the First Peoples there, Aboriginal people, and there was a way in which one particular tribe dealt with dreams by always making some sort of representation of things that happen in their dream when they wake up. We might have
Okay,
talked about this
okay.
before, and I know you do this. So, you draw what you see,
Right,
but the importance of that is like, they don't talk about it in terms of a dream journal, but the importance for them is to show the dream that you know it happened and that you're bringing it
Yeah.
with you into your waking life.
I like that a lot.
And I love that. So I started to try to do that with these spaces, and it's helped them gel more. But it's weird. Like, what's ended up happening as a result of it is that on a really consistent basis, like once a week, I'll be in a place or a situation where I'll suddenly I'll be reminded of that space in my dream, and I'll feel the feelings of that space. And it won't necessarily have anything to do with what I'm doing there, but it will just it'll take me into that space, and it'll bring that dream world into my waking world, and it's somehow like, it makes it feel more cohesive.
I think you're explaining something I've been experiencing my whole life.
Yeah.
And I've never had anybody describe the same thing. I've never had a word for it, a name for it, and I often don't remember the dream that it's attached to.
Yeah.
It's more like, it's almost like I don't want to say like a past life, but it's like another. For me, it gets to the point where it's dissociative almost. Like it's like I'm entering another realm, and lighting will do it to me. Like just a specific lighting, specific angles, shadows, just the ambiance of a thing. I'll be like, I've been here before, and it's not deja vu. It's wildly different than that.
It's different.
So as soon as I know there's Deja Reve.
Yeah.
And I think it's similar to that, but it's very
Deja Reve?
Yeah, it's kind of like Deja Vu, but it's more for like a dream you never had.
Okay. Okay.
Or I guess it can be for a dream.
Veja, not what is it?
Jamais vu.
No.
It's reverse deja vu.
Yeah, that incredible sense of never having been there before.
Yeah, no, it's
right.
It's like the opposite of that.
Vujade, that's it. Vujade.
Yeah. It is called jamais vu.
Really?
It is. I did a film on it in grad school. It's called
feeling
jamais vu.
unfamiliar.
It's reverse deja vu. Yeah. It's the feeling of suddenly being in a place and saying, I've never been here before. A familiar place.
I described having small seizures. And one of the ones I have is that, where I will suddenly just not be able to identify a person. I know it's them on one level, but I can't recognize them on another. And it'll only last for about 30 seconds, and then it's gone.
Also, the thing with cultural appropriation, like borrowing an idea from another culture, like you're doing, to me, that's not cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation is taking something sacred to another culture and turning it into something kitschy, or, just some cultural toy.
Now, everybody that's on Witch Talk, listen to what Seriah is saying right now. This is apparently a big thing going on TikTok, on Witch Talk.
Oh.
And I heard about this. Who was I talking to about this? It might have been like Adam Sane and Seriah, or it might have been Ren who was telling me, because he's up on top of that stuff.
Okay.
But essentially, there are all of these young witches on Witch Talk that are basically, they're like banning books. They're saying, like, if you read Masters, Marshall McGregor Masters, like, you're not a real witch because, like he made it all up, or that type,
so
something like that. Right, gatekeeping. Or, like, you can't read this book on, witchcraft in Jamaica because you're white.
Right.
But it's like you can't even read it
through that.
Right. Yeah.
And it's funny.
It's very
and probably not funny. It kind of sucks.
Because when the baseball team calls themselves the Redskins and they have the goofy little mascot, that's cultural appropriation. That's not okay.
Yeah.
At the time, no one thought twice about it. Yeah. Now we look at that and go, oh, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And I don't think a baseball team would do that today.
Yeah.
Because the cultural, because everything's been a little more aware and a little more sensitive, but taking something to use it the way it's meant to be used just because it came from another culture is not appropriation. That's respect to that culture.
Right. The way you describe it is definitely describing it from what you know of their
I was being a little facetious, thinking more about what's happening these days. If anybody that's listening, no, I don't. I let me say I was making fun of myself, but I don't think that's it. I definitely don't think that's cultural appropriation. No. And I think that it's very important for people to understand that, to be inspired, and even to take, I hear this is an argument that's going on. Like, you can only do European magic because you're European or something like that.
That's ridiculous.
And, I mean, if you want to try to all of a sudden pretend that you're like don't go Rachel Dolezal. What's her Dolezal? The woman who pretended she was black. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Don't do that. But like, if you like a spell that was from like Central American practice, and you want to try it out reverently, like, that's not a cultural appropriation.
No, not at all.
Maybe some of you are going to say that it is, but I disagree. I don't think it is. I think that being able to share things that are important across culture and be able to be respectful of them and use them in ways that they were meant to be used, that's sharing.
Exactly. And that's how it should be done.
Yeah.
When you're
Cultures
taking
have
it and
been
just
sharing.
making fun of it or using it as like I said, as a kitschy sort of joke, that's cultural appropriation, you know? We're just about out of time.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So, Chris, where can people find all your stuff?
You can find all my stuff at brightrectangle.com. That's it.
All right. Are your movies still on Amazon?
Movie's still on Amazon, and we might have some really exciting news about one of them, where it's going to be released, or who it's going to be released by soon. We'll see. Yes, you can still watch them on Amazon. I don't think they're free anymore. I think we're past that window, so you might have to pay 99 cents. Either that or email me, and I'll send something to you.
There you go. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You?
In 2019, the first Strange Realities Conference took place in Nashville, Tennessee. The pandemic and turmoil the following year could not stop 2020's conference from thriving in cyberspace as a live streaming event. Now, for 2021, the third annual Strange Realities Conference will combine these worlds into a paranormal hybrid event, live in person in Nashville and streaming online. Join us in exploring just how truly strange our reality can be with an interdimensional lineup of speakers presenting unique and intellectual perspectives on magic, mysteries, and the paranormal.
Featuring Alan Greenfield, Dr. J. Michael Bennett, aka Dr. Future, Tim Banal, Seriah Ascaf, Dr. Stephen Finley, Aaron Gullius, Amy Pachula, Brent Rains, Chris Ernst, Heather Mosier, Michael Hughes, Jose Herrera, Joshua Cutchin, Kiki Dombrowski, Nathan Isaac, P.D. Newman, Steven Snyder, aka Recluse, David Metcalf, Timothy Renner, Steve Stockton, and Ren Collier. Tickets available at strangerealitiesconference.com.
It's going to be amazing.
I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons for their support. It's all of you that keeps this show going. I particularly want to give a shout out to those pledging $10 or more. Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Eric Hervin, Tim, Andrew Nichols, The 100th Monkey Project, Patricia Giaquinta, Alex Whitcomb, Alfred Tuttle, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Barbara Fisher, Base FRQ, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy and Communicable, Chris Ernst, Craig Cicernos, Craig Parmenter, David Moore, Denise Sarek, Diane B., Dominic O'Malley, Edu Camahort, MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, J. Otto Bullitt, James Lattimore, Joanna Rojas, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Kristen L., Layla Malden, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, Mark Bowley, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Matthew Sproul, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Sam Sharon, Sedgder, Stone Wilderness, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, 36 Dingo, Vincent Trewell, Walker, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, William Lovelace, and Ren Collier. Thank you all so very much for your support. All right, there is a Patreon segment for this show, which will be up later this week. For Patreons, please consider becoming a Patreon. WhereDidTheRoadGo.com. Just click on the big Patreon link. You get extra content every single week. And if you also want to help, you can go rate us, preferably high, on your favorite podcatcher, and share us with people who you think might enjoy the show. I'll see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.